Hi everyone, and welcome to the video presentation for Module 23. This is our introduction to third species counterpoint. So in this video we'll be able to define the term third species counterpoint. We'll be able to understand the rules for third species counterpoint, and we will go through an example of how to write third species counterpoint. So in third species counterpoint, the line of counterpoint you compose is 4 times as fast as the Canis Firmus. And you can use consonant and dissonant harmonies. So second species had half notes, right? It was twice as fast as the Canis Firmus. First species was the same speed as the Canis Firmus. Now we're on level 3. We're writing things 4 times as fast. So this is an example of what third species counterpoint looks like. And you can see that for every whole note, we have a quarter note, because there are 4 quarter notes in a whole note. So for every note of the Canis Firmus, we're going to write 4 additional quarter notes at the same time. And the goal of the species is to learn how to use dissonant patterns. So let me play this and you can get an idea of what third species counterpoint sounds like. So a lot of notes, which makes it a little bit difficult to handle, but what we learn is how to use what are called dissonant patterns. And so that's just a way of kind of handling all these different notes at the same time and incorporating the dissonances correctly. All right, so just like in second species, the first note of every measure is a strong beat and must be a consonance. And you can see through here, for every first beat that we write, it's going to be a consonant harmony, okay? Just like in second species. Also, like second species, all the other beats in the measure are considered weak beats, and they can either be a consonance or a dissonance. Now, with second species, it was pretty straightforward because, if you wanted to use a dissonance, you could simply step to it and then resolve it by step. And third species is similar, but since there are so many more options and you have less strong beats, less consonances that you're required to use, instead of just kind of, figuring out which dissonances we want to use and step to them, we have to make sure that every dissonance we use is part of what's called a dissonant pattern. So you can see here, these 3 notes form one of the dissonant patterns. That one's called a passing tone, right? You'll see that they all have, almost every measure, actually all of the measures, have some kind of dissonant pattern. And they always go consonance, dissonance, consonance. So every single one has a group of 3 notes where one of the notes is dissonant, right? They're always on a weak beat. Sometimes they overlap, like in this third to last measure, we have a neighbor tone overlapping with what's called a passing tone, and then going to a double neighbor tone, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So they can overlap, they can just be by themselves, doesn't matter. But we use them to incorporate the dissonances, and that's the important thing to learn in this species. So let's talk about what a dissonant pattern is exactly. So it's a group of 3 or 4 quarter notes, and all the dissonant patterns we're going to learn about start on a consonance. So the first part of a dissonant pattern is to start on a consonance. Then it moves smoothly, usually by a step, but one of them can move by a leap, which we'll look at in a second. They move smoothly to a dissonance, okay? And then from that dissonance, they resolve by step to a consonance, okay? And there are only a certain number of possible dissonant patterns in third species, since you always have to approach that dissonance and resolve it by step. So let's look at those. So for each of these, you'll see that they start on a consonance and go to a dissonance, but they go to that dissonance in a different way. So the first pattern is called a dissonant passing tone pattern. And a passing tone moves away from a consonance by step, like all of them, but then it resolves by step to a new consonant note. Okay? So these 2 are passing tone patterns, 2 separate passing tone patterns in different directions. So the first one you'll see starts on an octave F, but then it goes down by a step to a ninth, which is a dissonance, but then it resolves down by step to a new note, to the note D. And that is a passing tone pattern since it resolves to a new note. Okay. You could call it a descending passing tone since it goes in the downward direction. And then you have the opposite direction starting on a tenth, moving up to a dissonance D, and then resolving to a consonance that's a different note, E. Okay. So whenever the dissonance moves in a new direction, right, moves to a new note, it's like the dissonance is forming a little bridge, a little roadway between two consonances. So we call it a passing tone because it's passing in between two different consonances. All right, so that's the first one. We had consonants, dissonance, consonants, and then again consonants, dissonance, consonants. Okay. And whenever we have a passing tone, we always label it with the letter P above the note, like I did here. All right, the other basic pattern is called the dissonant neighbor tone pattern. And a neighbor tone moves away from a consonant by step and then resolves by step to the same consonant note. So it's like it's going next door to a new note and then returning home. So we call it a neighbor tone pattern. So we'll see this first one here starts on a consonant sixth, moves down by step to the next door neighbor of that note, the seventh. Then it goes back home to the F. So a neighbor tone happens when you move to a dissonance but then return to the same note. Okay? Now this one is called a lower neighbor because it goes to the note below the consonants. Okay? Now in the next example here, we have a consonant's fifth between B flat and F. But then we go up by step to a dissonance fourth, and then that resolves down by step to the consonant fifth. So this one's called an upper neighbor tone pattern. Okay. So moves up to the dissonant neighbor and then goes back home to the consonant B flat. So passing tone moves through a dissonance to a new note. A neighbor tone goes next door to a dissonance and returns home to the same note. And whenever we have a neighbor tone, we label it with the letter N. All right. Now you can have something called a double neighbor tone pattern. And a double neighbor tone visits the notes that are above and below before returning home to the same consonant note. Okay. So here we have two examples of double neighbor tone patterns. The first one starts on a consonant third, moves to a dissonant second, moves to a dissonant fourth, and then returns to that consonant third. Okay. Now this is the only time you can ever leap between dissonances. If it's part of a neighbor tone pattern, double neighbor tone pattern, you can leap between the two dissonances that are the neighbors of that same note. Okay. And then over here, we have another neighbor tone pattern. This time we step down and leap up. Okay, so we're stepping to the dissonant neighbor of that third. And then we leap up to the other dissonant neighbor of that third, which is the second. And then we step down to resolve it to that B flat again. Okay, so double neighbor tone patterns. And we just label the double neighbor tone as DN for double neighbor tone. Okay, and this one is 4 notes long instead of the normal 3 notes. And then the final one is sort of a thing, but it really only exists in one place, but it is good to be aware of it. And it's sort of called this, not really, I'll just call it a double passing tone pattern. And this just happens whenever you move between a perfect fourth and a diminished fifth. Since those two dissonances are sometimes next to each other in the scale, it's actually possible to do that, even though technically your perfect fourth is not resolving to a consonance like we would expect it to. Okay, so here's an example of one situation where that would happen. So between the G and the B flat in this example is a consonant third, but then we'll step down as a passing tone to a fourth, and then if we keep stepping, we get another passing tone diminished fifth, and then that resolves finally to a consonant sixth. Right? And that is one of the few cases where we can, not resolve by step to a consonance. So because that's all part of the same pattern, it happens quickly, so it's actually okay to do that in that situation. All right. And so we would label both the passing tones with the letter P in that case. We don't really do D, P, I guess, for double passing tone. Just write two P's for the two passing tones that are in that pattern. Okay. So let's kind of summarize this. So harmony and rhythm for third species counterpoint. The first measure will always have a quarter rest, and that's so that the rhythm of third species happens immediately. The strong beats, which are the downbeats of all the measures, must have a consonance. Weak beats, which are the other notes of the measure, can be a consonance or a dissonance. And any dissonance that you want to use must be part of a dissonant pattern, such as a passing tone, a neighbor tone, a double neighbor tone, or in that rare case of double passing tone. Okay. And then any unisons can be used on weak beats just like they are in second species. Now the other rules apply too, like you have to start on a unison or an octave or a fifth if you're writing the upper voice of a counterpoint. You must end on a unison or an octave. Things like that still apply. Okay. Let's talk about relative motion, and the previous rules apply to this too. And so we cannot have parallel unisons, fifths, or octaves. And this is what a parallel fifth would look like in third species. Let's just say third species up there, sorry. So in this case, this is not correct because we have an octave, a seventh, sixth, fifth, and then that fifth moves at the same time as the lower voice moves, so it becomes parallel fifths between the G, which is sustained, and the D, that's the new note, moving up to the A together. So since they move at the same time, at the same interval, we call that a parallel fifth. Right, so that is not allowed. No repeated notes are allowed, just like in second species. The cadence should always have contrary motion by step, like always. And accented octaves and fifths are okay. So like in this case, we have a fifth on a strong beat, and then another fifth on the next strong beat. And that is okay because there's a lot of time in between those fifths. So the more time we have in between those strong intervals, the less like parallel fifths they sound. And so you can get away with something like this. But it should be noted that you cannot do it for a long time because, since those strong beats are what we hear as being emphasized, we need to make sure that those are reflecting the motion, the contrary motion, the independence of the lines between the cantus firmus and the counterpoint. So you can't have a fifth on a strong beat followed by another fifth on a strong beat, and then another fifth, and then another fifth, and then another fifth, because then that means they're moving in the same direction at the same interval, which is not what we want. So you can do it maybe twice. That would be it. Okay, and then like in second species, across a bar line, you don't want to leap more than a perfect fourth, which we've talked about a little bit. Okay. So writing third species counterpoint, the technique is the same. You want to, first make a plan, shape high point, location, and then the cadence. Then you want to choose the high point in the first note. And then one optional step, especially when you're first starting out with this, is to do what I call writing guideposts. And so that means we're going to kind of skip ahead in the counterpoint and sort of give the downbeat of every single measure. Okay, writing the strong beat of every single measure. And that way we can kind of give, little mini goals, because it's a lot of notes to write, and you have to make sure that you're writing the right kind of patterns and stuff like that. So if you give yourself little tiny goals that reflect the overall direction of the line, it can help a lot with this stuff, which I'll show you in a second how to do that. And then compose the rest just like we did before, using dissonant patterns to connect those guideposts. All right, so let's talk about how to do this. And so I'll play the Canis Firmus as I normally do, and then we'll get started on writing this. Okay, so the tonic is G. The shape kind of reaches a high point in the fourth measure there with that D, so we want to be aware of that. And yeah, it's in the bass clef. Okay, great. So to get started, we need to make our plan. So planning the shape, the high point location, and the cadence. And so we can go ahead and write the cadence like we normally do. And since this is G minor, this has to end on F sharp, which then has to resolve to G. So our last note's going to be a G. And I'll write in all my intervals. Hopefully this won't get too crowded. We'll have a sixth and then an octave. All right. Now you could go ahead and write the rest of the notes in that measure, but I'll just kind of skip it for now. And I'm going to, move that F sharp over a little bit because I think we're going to run out of room. Okay. So we have our cadence. That is contrary motion by step, like it should be. Right. And then we want to plan our high point location. Now the high point in our Canis Firmus is this measure. So as always, we don't want our high point to be near that, right, or on that same measure. But there's not a lot of room. This is a short Canis Firmus. So again, I think we've planned this before. We can plan to have our high point kind of in this location. And since, we were writing a lot of notes, we can give ourselves some flexibility. So let's say we could maybe have it be in that measure if we have to, a little bit over, and then maybe like the downbeat of that measure too. So the high point will be somewhere in this area. Okay. And now we want to make a plan. So start by writing your shape, creating as much contrary motion. So this, starts in the upwards direction. So we want to make our shape go in the downward direction. So we'll start by sort of writing a little whooshy symbol down, and then we'll have to turn around at some point, get up to our high point here, then we'll have to go in the downward direction again, and then make sure we're low enough to get to our contrary motion there that we already wrote. Okay, so we have our shape, our high point location, and our cadence, so that's good. Now we should choose a high point and a first note. So we can kind of plan, maybe our high point could be this maybe E flat here. So that's going to be a 10th, which is as far from each other as the voices can get. So we'll maybe keep that for now. Might change it later, but that gives us a good goal. And then we want to choose our first note. So always start with a rest. So we'll write in our rest. Now this first note can be an octave, a fifth, or a unison. Unison won't allow us to go in the downward direction. A fifth, again, doesn't give us a lot of room because remember we have to write 1, 2, 3 notes and then another note here. So if we started on this fifth D, we wanted to go down, that's going to get us to a note that is below that C. So that D is probably not going to work either, or at least it will not let us use the shape that we want to use. So let's give ourselves as much room as possible by starting on the note G here. And this will be an octave. Right? And again, there's nothing on this first note. All right, and then there we go. So we have our high point and our first note. So now we have sort of a rough idea of what we're going to do with this. Now let's talk about this guidepost technique. So we're going to kind of pick some notes that will let us, select little points along this line that will guide us along. So then we can focus on what kinds of dissonant patterns we need to use to get to those guide points. So I'm going to write, these guide points are going to be the downbeat of every single measure. So the first quarter note in every single measure. We already have one actually with this E flat. So that's a start. But let's go from the beginning and see what we can pick. Now, they always have to be consonances. So in some ways, this is kind of like writing first species counterpoint. So every note we pick has to be a consonant. So if we want to go down from this G, a note we could pick would be the note E flat, because that's a consonant with that C, so that's a third. And then we could, if we want to start going back up, you know, we have a lot of room to go to, so maybe we could pick this B flat here. And that's going to be an octave. And then once we get a little further along, you know, is there a note in here we could pick? You know, we could pick D, but that doesn't give us a lot of room. So one thing to remember is that since a lot of our dissonant patterns let us stay on the same note, right? Like neighbor tones let you, you know, don't make you go too far away from that B flat. You can repeat notes too. So maybe we could plan on trying to get to that B flat and have some kind of, you could use like a double neighbor tone pattern to get to that B flat if we wanted to. All right. And then we would need to go in the downward direction, so we could write the note C here if we wanted to. And that makes a third, I'm sorry, makes a 10th. Oh, and over here we had a 6th with that D. All right, and then we just really need a couple more notes to end this little guideline thing. We could maybe try to get to that B flat. That'll be an octave. And then here, we need to have something that harmonizes with that A. So we could pick A. That would create parallel octaves, which actually are okay in this species, aren't they? In that case, because they're not parallel since there's a lot of distance. So maybe we could try to get to that A if we can do it. Okay. So there are our guideposts. Now, the very first assignment that you have to do will give you these guideposts. So you don't have to worry about step 3 immediately. So, you know, the assignment for this module will look exactly like this, like we have it right here. So now your job is to go to step 4, compose the rest using dissonant patterns to connect the guideposts, right? So now we only need to pick enough notes to kind of connect the dots that we've given ourselves, connect the guideposts that we've given ourselves. So for instance, how could we get from this G to this E flat? Well, we want to go in the downward direction. So we could go down to an F, right? Which makes it a 7th, which is a dissonance. So this needs to be part of some kind of dissonant pattern, right? Well, we could resolve it down by step to an E flat, in which case it would be a passing tone, but we can't repeat notes. So we can't do that. So maybe we can use that dissonance as a different kind of chord tone, non-chord tone pattern, or dissonant pattern. So we could move maybe back up to the G, in which case that F is now a neighbor tone, and G, F, G is part of a neighbor tone pattern. So let's see how that worked out, and then we'll go to that E flat. Yeah, that sounds pretty nice. Okay. Now we have a lot of distance to cover between this E flat and this B flat, which means we need to start going in the upwards direction. Okay? And the upwards direction will mean we need to go up to an F, which will create a 4th with our C. So this needs to be part of a pattern as well, and I wrote a P because this is going to be part of a passing tone pattern. So this will go 3rd, 4th, 5th, and then we could go up to another consonants, A. So 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, and that's fine. So we've connected the dots between that E flat and that B flat by writing 3 notes in that direction of the B flat and getting to that B flat. Okay. Now from here, we decided that we're going to kind of stay in the same area, this B flat. So we could try a double neighbor tone pattern if we wanted to. So we could go up to a C, and then down to an A, and then back to the B flat. But that won't work because we cannot repeat that, that B flat. So we could try to reverse this a little bit. Maybe just keep it a normal neighbor tone pattern. So B flat to C, neighbor tone, that's a 7th. Resolve that down by step to its home base of B flat, octave. And then we could go down to maybe a different neighbor, this one. So that's now a 7th. Oh, because I wrote that wrong, sorry. That C is not a 7th, that C is a 9th. And then octave and then 7th. So now we have octave B flat, 9th for a C, octave B flat, and then now a 7th. So we've had neighbor tone, neighbor tone. So these neighbor tone patterns have kind of overlapped. And there we go, we get to that B flat. So let's see what that sounded like. Yeah, kind of nice. So far we have. Okay. Not bad. Now, notice that we had octave, something in between, and then octave. That is not considered to be accented octaves because there's no motion, first of all. So you can only have something like accented octaves or parallel octaves when there's some kind of motion. The motion here, though, is sort of like oblique motion because one voice is staying the same and the other is moving. So whenever that happens, you cannot have parallel motion or accented intervals or anything like that. So this is not a case of anything wrong. We just are returning to that same interval. So that is not a case of parallel octaves or anything like that. Okay, so then we move to this B flat to D 6th. Now we need to get up to this E flat, so we want to start moving in the upwards direction. So we'll go B flat, C, we'll create a 7th. So that's a dissonance, so we need to use it as part of some kind of pattern, right? So we'll go up to maybe the D, which is an octave, which makes this a passing tone, so we'll write P. I just realized I'm writing these below. I guess I should be writing these above. Yeah, it doesn't really matter. It's a little cleaner, I guess, if you write it above, so we'll do that. All right, so then we need to think of a way to get to that E flat there. Now you could, of course, if we kept going, we'd end up on this E flat, but again, you can't have repeated notes. So one thing you might be able to do is have a little leap, right? So we haven't had really any leaps except over here. So maybe we can have a leap up to an F. And whenever you leap, you just need to make sure that you're leaping to a consonance. And so from the D to an F is a minor third, and then from the low D in the cantus firmus to the F in the melody is a 10th. So that's okay, that's a consonant, so that'll work. Let's see what that sounds like. Kind of nice, I like the little change of direction there. Okay, great. So let's keep on going. So from this high point, we need to go in the downward direction. So we can make a passing tone here. So now that's a 9th. And as a passing tone, we'll resolve that to a C octave. Okay. Now we could go to a B flat here. And that is a neighbor tone with our next note, right? Because you have these patterns can go over bar lines too. So now that is a 7th. So that's a neighbor tone to our C. And then the C becomes a 10th in the next measure. So that will work fine. All right, now we need to get to that B flat. And so let's see what happens when we go maybe up and then down. So up to a D, which is a neighbor tone, back down to a C, and then B flat. So that'll just repeat the notes. We can't really do that. How about if we went down? Let's see. So C to B flat, to an A as an octave, and then not sure what to do at that point. We could go to a G, but then that has to resolve down by step. So this B flat's kind of causing a problem for us. So we could maybe change our guidepost and maybe just kind of leave it out and see what we like here and figure out where to go from there. So the guideposts, can be changed if you want them to be changed. So maybe we'll go, let's have a little bit of a leap down to an A. Now that's consonants, we don't have to do anything special with that. Then maybe we could step up to a B flat, which is a ninth. So that needs to be part of some kind of pattern. We could go maybe up to a C. And then we end up with resolving that. And now that ninth is a passing tone. And then if we want to keep going in the same direction, we could go up to the note D. So now we change the guidepost there to become a D. So now that's a tenth, not an octave. Right. Now we need to go, hopefully, down. So let's see what happens if we just kind of step down. So this will become a ninth, which, if we want to keep going down, will become an octave, which could then become a seventh. But then we would need to resolve that by step. And the only way we can resolve that by step is by going to a B flat, which is dissonant, or going to a G, which is also dissonant. So neither of those will work, which means that our A will not work either. So we're going to have to find a different way to figure this out. So that won't work. In this species, since there's so many notes, what you could try next is maybe a leap. So start by a leap and then step down. So maybe leaping a third, stepping down to an A, stepping to a G, and then we'll see what happens. So we could get to an A there if we wanted to. See what we wrote. So from that tenth, we leap down to an octave, which then we step down to a seventh. So now that's a passing tone, which resolves to a sixth, which then, if we kept this A, would resolve to a octave. So let's see if we can figure out this last measure now. So we have an A. We could go down to a G. That is a seventh, which means that needs to resolve in some way to become a consonant. So we could have it maybe resolve back up to the A. So let's see what that sounds like. That's not bad. Another thing we could do is sort of change our minds what that guidepost is. We could maybe move that A down to an F sharp. And then we haven't had one of these yet, so we could try to use it. Maybe make it a double neighbor tone, so step up to a G. And then, to prevent our augmented seconds like we've done before, we could make this an E natural, so like a melodic minor scale, and then make this our F sharp from before. And so now we end up with our double neighbor tone pattern. Okay, so it's a double neighbor tone of F sharp. So that's one thing you can do at endings like this. So that seventh, right, can now freely sort of, well, it's not a dissonance anyway, but go down to the fifth and then to the sixth. So there you go. All right, let's see how this turned out. Yeah, not bad. Okay, great. So that'll give you some ideas, hopefully how to start this. Now, like I said, the first assignment will give you the guideposts I was talking about. So all you have to do is figure out how to get to those guideposts, right? By using the right kind of dissonant pattern. And one thing to remember is that if you're trying to go a long distance, like if the distance between your guideposts is something like a fifth, right? You're going to have to use passing tones because passing tones go to a new note, right? If you're trying to get a small distance, like, maybe to the same note, or maybe something that's like a third, you'll have to probably use neighbor tones because neighbor tones don't change the note, right? They go back to the same note. So, if you're trying to go a long way, use the passing tones. If you're trying to go a short distance, use neighbor tones. Once you've used your neighbor tone, you're free to leap like we did in our fourth measure here, right? So small leaps are fine. Big leaps are okay too, but they always have to be on weak beats and never land on a strong beat. Okay. All right, great. Well, thanks for watching and have a great day.